to present ways how we can create health equity and advocacy around health across the Black and brown communities across New York City. So those are what we consider our strategic partnerships. We create innovative community-based health promotion and research programs. So the HIV/AIDS program that we have is one of those, right? And so we have other programs such as our mental health program. We have a cardiovascular disease program, cancer disparities, just to name a few. And then the preparation of a more diverse workforce of health professionals. So Faven just talked about our Health Science Academy. So that kind of addresses how we can increase the healthcare workforce and create diversity with Black and brown people within the healthcare field, because our healthcare field only make up about 1% of Black people, right? And so how can we expect to have Black people go to doctors and there's no representation where you can feel comfortable? So we try to find ways of how we can increase the workforce field by encouraging young, brilliant Black and brown students to be able to pursue their careers or their interest in healthcare, and that can look like nursing, dentistry, being a doctor, being a social worker, being a public health professional, right? So that can look like many different things. All right, so again, this kind of just highlights some of the work that we do within our community. So we have our Health Science Academy. We also have summer internship programs for high school students, like our Beyond the Stigma program, our Brooklyn Health Disparities internship that's led by Faven. And also, again, we do a lot of community outreach work. So we're always in barbershops. We're always in hair salons, we're always in senior centers, community centers. So whenever someone comes and requests for us to do a presentation, we make it our duty to show up, and so that we can educate the community about different health topics. Okay, so we're just gonna get into a little bit and kind of define the difference between what is HIV and what is AIDS. We tend to use the terms interchangeable, or we'll just say AIDS, but they are technically two different stages, right? So HIV is short for human immunodeficiency virus, which is a virus that attacks immune cells that help the body fight infection, making a person more vulnerable to other infections and diseases. So what that is basically saying is that this HIV virus is attacking our white blood cells, or our immune cells, right? And our immune cells and our white blood cells help fight against diseases. So if the virus is fighting or attacking this white blood cell, the white blood cell wouldn't be able to protect the body against other diseases. So that can look like pneumonia, that can look like tuberculosis, right? And so what happens is the body or the person who has an HIV infection becomes susceptible or vulnerable to these other diseases, right? And this is what causes a person to die. So people don't actually die from HIV or AIDS, they die from other susceptible diseases because the HIV virus is attacking the immune cells, right? And so HIV is the first stage, right? And so then the HIV virus then causes AIDS. And what AIDS is a late stage of HIV infection that occurs when the body's immune system is so badly damaged because of the virus, right? So usually people who are living with HIV, they may not be taking their medication. And because they're not taking their medication, HIV would then become AIDS. And then at that point, a lot of times people die at this late stage of HIV, which is AIDS, because their body cannot fight the other infections. So let's say someone is diagnosed with cancer, but they're also HIV positive. They're more likely to die because of cancer. Their body cannot fight against the cancer. Or it can look like COVID. If you're HIV positive, you're infected with COVID, right? The immune cells or your body defense system is so low, it can't fight against the COVID virus. So then usually people end up dying. Any questions about that? Is that clear? Okay. So now that I just defined the difference between HIV and AIDS and what specifically HIV and AIDS are, I wanted to pose a question for everyone. And again, we want this to be a collective conversation. So how is HIV viewed or spoken about in our community? Yes.
Um, when there is conversation, person with HIV is usually scorned, and we feel like, or what I hear is, they obviously have to be living some kind of life that is not good.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Yes, Ms. Herbert.
Years ago, HIV was more out in the public, because on bus stops they would talk about, they would have posters about HIV/AIDS and where you could go and get treatments and stuff like that from the Department of Health. But nowadays, nothing is there. And it's as though everything is swept underneath the rug. And there were different clinics and things that people could go get treatment. I don't hear much of them anymore. We're not talking about HIV/AIDS like we used to. And that's why this evening I brought you all here, because this month is World AIDS Awareness Month, the 1st of December. And I want to bring about awareness that HIV is still alive in our community and mostly among the seniors too.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm sorry that most people didn't come out this evening to listen to this very important program.
Yeah. Don't worry, we can always do it part 2. So anyone else before moving on? In the back. That's a good question. We'll talk about it. So thank you for asking that question.
The question was, how is it viewed in the community?
Yeah, how is it spoken about or viewed?
I have been, how is it viewed? I've heard a lot about it being drug addicts who has HIV/AIDS, or people who are of another orientation, sexual orientation. For example, you would say that, I used to hear that a lot of it was for people who are, what do you say that? What was that?
Sure.
Yes, homosexuals and bisexuals and all that. That's how it's talked about. I've heard a lot that way.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll talk about anybody else. Okay, so all of you brought up some really good points, and we'll talk about a couple of those things. It was mentioned that it's not as talked about as much anymore. The community kind of looks at it like, well, if someone has HIV, usually they're involved in some things that they shouldn't be involved in. It's only mostly people who identify as homosexuals or people who have same-sex partners are usually infected or impacted by HIV. So we're going to address a lot of these things.
The dangerous thing now with HIV, you don't know who have HIV/AIDS, because years ago you could see a person and say, oh, that one have AIDS, but not today. Today they look healthy and strong and robust, so you don't know they're still carrying the virus.
Right.
So that's the dangerous part about it.
But it's also a good thing, right? Because people are living healthy lives. But then it's also important as to why we should know our partner's statuses when it comes to HIV. But that's why you ask them to take HIV tests, and they have to, ask them to show it to you. So we'll get into a lot of that. So thank you for bringing that up. All right. So according to the CDC in 2022, right, this is a graph with the HIV diagnosis. So those are people who are newly infected by HIV in 2022, and how it was broken up based off race, gender, and sexual orientation. So to most people, common knowledge is that men who have sex with men or male-to-male sexual contact usually have higher rates of HIV, usually even within our media, that is what's usually pushed, right? And so men who have sex with men, Hispanic men and Black men have the highest rates and the highest diagnoses in 2022 across the United States, right? Followed by white men who have sex with men. And then followed by men who have sex with men. Black women who have heterosexual contact have the next highest rates of HIV. And a lot of the conversations is that you always just see on media HIV, and the conversation around that is just around men who have homosexual contact, right? But they would never really talk about other groups of people who have HIV infections. And so Black women actually have high rates of HIV infections, especially women who have sex with men, right? And then followed by Black women is then Black men who have heterosexual contact, so men who have sex with women. And a lot of times media is not highlighting this, and this has just been also a conversation that a lot of Black public health professionals, people or Black women who are in the HIV space are talking about. We need to see representation of that and the statistics of that, because we're walking around thinking, well, this doesn't impact me, right? And from what I'm looking at, a lot of Black women are here today, and these things are yeah, a lot of times people are shocked to hear that, right? And so how can we address these issues within our communities and find ways to educate each other in ways to that we can lower the HIV rates, especially within Black women and Black men who have heterosexual contact, and not just people who have male-to-male sexual contact. And so, because this World AIDS Day was on Monday, December 1st, the Department of Health, New York City's Department of Health, released new statistics, they do this every year, of the HIV rates within New York City. So we kind of looked at what HIV rates look like across the nation, but like what does it really look like within our neighborhoods, right? And so overall, in 2024, 1,791 people were newly diagnosed with HIV last year. And that is a 5.4% increase from 2023. So obviously you can see HIV/AIDS is still a problem within our community. And not only that, the rate has increased about over 5%. Comparing it to 2019 and right now, it's about the same. So a lot of the conversation is that during COVID, everybody was locked down, nobody was going outside, and so people didn't really have opportunities to have sexual contact. So we did see the rates plummet. But now that the world is quote unquote open back up, we can see HIV rates rising every year. And maybe by the end of this year, and when we get the data from next year, we might see that HIV is projected to be higher in 2025 compared to 2019. And that can be a reflection of our current administration, how they're attacking the healthcare system and the lack of information that's being shared within our community, right? And so another highlight released by the DOH-MH is that HIV rates increased by 18% in women in 2024 compared to 2023. And actually, it also increased across with men as well, right? But men in general usually have the highest rates of HIV. But to see an 18% increase within 1 year, that's a lot, right? That's a lot. And 14%, there was a 14% increase in HIV diagnosis from 2019 to 2024 in people between the ages of 30 and 39. There was a 15% increase in HIV diagnosis from 2019 to 2024 in people between the ages of 40 and 49, and a 12% increase in HIV diagnosis from 2019 to 2024 in people over the age of 60. So there are people who are, older, who are still sexually active, so we always leave them out of the conversation. But older people are still sexually active, right? And so it's not just young people who are having sex. And yes, but people tend to not think about that. People are always surprised that there's actually high rates of STDs in senior homes. And people are like, well, in senior homes, there's STDs and STIs go around, and people get infected with those things in senior centers and senior homes. People are having sex over the age of 60. And sometimes that's like a shock for some people. It's not really a part of the conversation. So we're also that's kind of like ageism. I see your hand, I'm going to get to you. Ageism, right? And then not realizing, not having the conversation and ignoring the fact that people are still sexually active when they're older. There was a question here in the back, hand raised in the back.
I just want to say 60s are not in the senior home, so we may want to revise that. A whole bunch of 60-year-olds sitting in here, we're not in the senior home, so we may need to revise that a little bit. I was just wondering about the statistics, if you have like a breakdown with the increase. Is it just in the heterosexual group, or it goes,
It's all groups.
So is it more in one group than the other, or you just have one big number that says there's an increase and this is the increase, it doesn't matter, you don't have a breakdown of that?
Yeah, so we're gonna have some graphs in the next slides. And when I said we're gonna have some graphs in the next slides, we'll talk about that. Breaking it down by race, gender, sexual orientation as well, right? And also when I said senior homes, I wasn't including just 60 yet. But people over the age of 60, it's increased by 12% with HIV diagnosis. But I was just trying to highlight that people who are living in seniors' homes also experience STI and STD rates, right? Any other questions? All right, so there was a 12% increase in HIV diagnosis between the group ages of 13 to 19. So that was a very, very large increase. And that was between comparing 2023 to 2024. Yep, 13 to 19. Well, it's a group, so it could probably be youth who are older, like, between the 17, 18, 19 age group. It's just, it's not looking at specifically just 13-year-olds, but there are 13 and young adults, preteens who are sexually active.
What I'll also add is that what we're also seeing in the data is that kids are being sexually active at an earlier age. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the statistics used to be with folks within the ages of 15 to 24. That's like the normal target. And now you're starting to see it at an earlier age. And so that makes us think about, well, how do we start having conversations with youth at an earlier age so that they're properly educated and informed?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right. So this graph just kind of shows more of a breakdown of what I was just highlighting in the previous slide. So the first part is 2019 and 2014 comparison between gender, and then the right side is comparing 2023 to 2024, right? And comparing the diagnosis in 2019 to 2024 and how they compared in 2023 to 2024, right? So between 2019 and 2024, there has been a 4% decrease within the last 6 years of HIV diagnosis, but there was a 2% increase amongst men, but there was a 2% increase between 2023 and 2024 amongst men. But overall, in the last 6 years, the rates are still lower and a little bit lower compared to 2019. However, when we look at women, in the last 6 years, there's been an overall 11% increase. And between 2023 and 2024, within that 1 year time frame, there was an 18% increase amongst women, right? So again, women are being left out of the conversations consistently when it comes to the HIV conversation. And then when we look at transgendered women, there was a 30% increase between the last 6 years. Transgendered men, a 200% increase in the last 6 years. And other people who are non-binary, it was just there was a 80% decrease. Any questions about that? Mm-hmm.
No, what I was saying, in the older population, like over 60, then the women, they may think, oh, I cannot get pregnant anymore, so I can just do whatever I have to do because there's no babies coming. So, and have unprotected sex. And that's why it's it's growing in our community because of that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it could be that as well. And people, at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And we're all gonna make decisions and have just natural human behaviors. And so it could be a lot of reasons why, as to why these rates are going up. It could be lack of sexual education, right? Lack of healthcare access and resources. People may not have, again, insurance to be able to get the care that they need, or may not even know where to go where they need the information. So that's why it's important that a lot of organizations and clinics bring the information to the community, because the services are there, the resources are there, And so it can be a lot of reasons as to why the rates are higher in older groups. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so when you are married, mm-hmm. you have no control over who your partner,
mm-hmm.
have
extramarital
relations
affairs.
with.
Yeah.
How does a woman protect herself from a partner that may be indulging on the outskirts?
Right. One, the best way she can do, I feel like it really boils down to personal choices, right? The first thought that comes to mind is, well, if I'm aware my partner or my spouse is having extramarital affairs.
I'm not aware.
Well, if you're not aware, whenever you go to your OBGYN clinic, you can get HIV testings and STD testings. Okay. It's always encouraged, even if you're married, people have this concept that, well, I only have one sexual partner. I'm not gonna get HIV or STDs, and sometimes even, too, we put a lot of trust in people, and no matter who the person is, right? You can't always you'd love to trust your partner, but you can't always trust your partner, right? Yeah. So you just have to protect yourself, and even in most times within these marriages, most likely you're not using a condom, right? So you can always get HIV testing, and then there is a choice of PrEP, and so we're gonna talk about PrEP a little bit. In our slides.
I saw it on the survey. I wondered what it was. So yeah. You are recommending, or at least advising, that, just get the HIV test tested when you get your OBGYN visit.
Yes.
Is that an extra cost insurance-wise?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
Sorry, and I'll also add, that's a test that doesn't necessarily need to be just with your OBGYN.
Yeah.
If you go for your annual checkup and you say, I want my labs, I want to do like an annual labs where they test for A1C or your vitamin C or vitamin D, you can also ask for
HIV.
Always do it. Yeah. Through your
PCP.
Correct.
Yeah. You can. Well, no, PrEP, unless you're taking PrEP. So then if you feel like, this is all personal, if you're taking PrEP, you more than likely prevent yourself from 99% chance preventing yourself from contracting HIV from someone who is HIV positive. But then also it boils down just to like personal, what do you choose to do? Like, how aware are you of your partner stepping out of your marriage and relationship?
Yeah. Right. So there's a couple of things that we can think about, right? There's how do we protect ourselves in the actual act, right?
Right.
Making decisions about intercourse and whether you want to use a condom, whether you want to use PrEP, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Then there's a second element of like, how do I enhance communication in my relationship, right? How do I ensure that we're having conversations about what is appropriate, what's not appropriate? And then the third thing is thinking about that there are multiple ways that you can get HIV/AIDS. Right. And so it's not just about sexual contact.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to make sure that we're not stigmatizing the conversation around HIV/AIDS, even though sexual contact is one of the primary ways that it's transmitted, that it's not the only way. And so this conversation is around how do we take care of our health and wellness, right? In the same way that you think about I want to make sure that I'm not diabetic, right? So I'm going to do my A1C. Is the same way you want to think about, I want to make sure that I'm not getting any sexually transmitted diseases. And so what lifestyle choices am I making, but also how am I monitoring my health on an annual basis so that when changes occur, I'm aware, right? And that's the empowerment that we have. If you have the luxury of, and you know, I recognize that it's a luxury, even though it's a right, to access to health insurance. But there's plenty of free HIV/AIDS testing, and we can get into that a little bit later. But I just want to make sure that the conversation is all the ways that you can get it. Correct.
Yeah. Also, you talk about changes, which we could look out for certain changes. I guess early stage, that you're infected with something unknown. So we're going to talk about that, right? Those changes?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm really intrigued by PrEP. I don't know what it is.
There's a question.
We have one more question, and then Brittany will go back to you.
I wanted to say that getting the HIV/AIDS, it's not just through the sex and you hit on it. So if you have your partner had blood transfusion, because you could get it like that, you need to just pay attention to that. But I also want to make note, you guys could look at me. Oh, I got to sit down. I have condoms. Anybody? And it's confidential. You can come and see me. I will help you also if you need to get additional information. I can be your resource, and everything will be confidential. But I have condoms, so let me know.
Thank you for sharing that.
We have resources here at the church, and I really want to appreciate that. One other thing, that oftentimes these types of conversations are stigmatized in houses of worship, right? And we are all human beings who have lives. And so I appreciate that we're able to have this conversation within a house of worship because it's about our health and wellness. And so, yes. So we're gonna, okay, one last comment, and then we'll go back to Brittany. Otherwise, we'll keep you here all night.
Okay, at the Department of Health, there is a program there that we have called BBIAG. We have once a month you have the blood pressure task force. You have 3 task forces. You have blood pressure, HIV, and cancer task force. And we meet every Wednesday of the month. We meet, and if it's blood pressure, the first Wednesday is blood pressure, the second Wednesday is HIV/AIDS, and the third Wednesday is cancer. And we have different presentations on these topics. And next Wednesday down at the Borough Hall, we're having to commemorate the World AIDS Day. Next Wednesday at Borough Hall, we're having a big presentation there as well. So, you know, people are actually being informed, but sometimes we don't take the time to go out there and learn.
Yeah.
And knowledge is power.
Definitely.
Or you think I don't need it. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'm protected. Okay, Brittany, back to you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so the next slide we have here is a heat map of New York City and the 5 boroughs. I'm going to try to use the mouse. All right, so here is Brooklyn. This is Manhattan. We have the Bronx, Staten Island, Queens, Far Rockaway. And so this map is showing that the darkest pink, and this is between 2019 and 2024, the neighborhoods with the darkest pink had the highest HIV diagnosis, right? And what we realized with this map is that the communities where mostly Black and brown people, or people who identify as Black, Hispanic, or Latino, right? These neighborhoods have the highest rates of HIV. And so we're around in this area in central Brooklyn, right? So you can see that central Brooklyn, Harlem, a lot of the parts of the Bronx, and then the dark location here is West Village, right? And then by the second darkest red is other neighborhoods that also have Black and brown people, right? So then we see that there's not only through the first graph that I showed you from the CDC, across the United States, it also reflects within our neighborhood, right? In that we're seeing Black and Hispanic people with the highest rates of HIV/AIDS. Mm-hmm.
Well, Troy, is that something that we can do? Are we able to zoom in to the slides?
No.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll follow up with Ms. Herbert and make sure that you guys have access to the materials.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is found on the DOH's website. So if you just type in like HIV surveillance on Google, it would definitely pop up, and all this data is there as well. Okay, next slide. All right. And so when we're looking at the borough of residents and just looking at the different boroughs across New York City, since 2019, Brooklyn has been consistently had the highest rates of HIV compared to the other four boroughs, followed by the Bronx, then Queens, then Manhattan. And then outside of New York City, so usually maybe it could be like Long Island or the little counties near like Yonkers, and then followed by Staten Island. And the last 30 of those diagnoses were actually unknown in 2024, right? So again, this is just kind of confirming these high rates of HIV within Black and brown neighborhoods. And these are the neighborhoods that we're currently in right now, right? And so obviously it's still an issue within our communities. All right, and so.
We have a question here, Brittany.
A question, sorry.
Would it, to account for the high disparity in Brooklyn in terms of the numbers, would you say because it has a larger population than all the other boroughs, so that kind of factor it numerically, exponentially?
Yes and no. So Brooklyn does have a larger population than the other 5 boroughs. However, the way the data is set up is that it stratifies to ensure that it accounts for the fact that Brooklyn has a larger population than the other 5 boroughs. And so it's based off every 100,000, it's very technical and epidemiological. So, but overall, they account for that, so it still shows that Brooklyn still has higher rates compared to the Bronx, even though the population is larger. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not accounting for the number of increases, but it's calculating the rate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a good point, because Brooklyn is the biggest borough.
The biggest borough, and there's more people living in Brooklyn than the other 5 boroughs.
Different barriers there. We have.
Oh, yes. We'll talk about the different barriers that Brooklyn, but all boroughs face,
yeah.
that contribute to this.
Yes. And so the other part, okay, so what I was looking at here was sharing how race and ethnicity, how the diagnoses were divided between populations. And so, as I mentioned, Black people had the highest rates, followed by Latino, followed by people who identify as whites, and then Asian and Pacific Islander, multiracial, et cetera. But what I really like to focus on is the image at the bottom. And so this, again, is comparing people based off race and then looking at the overall racial population across New York City, right? So Black people had accounted for 44% of all the newly HIV diagnoses in 2024. But in New York City, Black people only make up 22 of New York City's population, right? And so that's a little bit concerning. And that's usually the case for most of our health-related issues. This could be the case for diabetes, for cancer. Usually it's like for cardiovascular disease. This is usually the case. Black people always have the highest rates of all these health-related issues, but account for the smallest part of the actual population, right? And so when you even look at people who identify as Latino, they accounted for 42% of HIV diagnosis, but they only make up 28% of New York City's population. But then when you even look at white people, they were only diagnosed by 8%, but they're 32% of the population. So white people actually account for more of the population compared to Black people, and then even compared to Hispanic people, but only 8% of white people actually was diagnosed with HIV. So what does that kind of say about, again, the barriers, the disparities within our communities? And we have to think about, like, why are these things happening, right? Why is it that white people are having less diagnosis of HIV rates compared to Black and Hispanic people? Yeah, so a lot of these things is to, like we mentioned, access. You know, they're getting the education, the resources are in their communities, it's being brought to them. And then also we have to think about other things like racism, which is a huge thing, which plays into all of this, poverty, and all these different income, yes, poverty, income, and all these other social factors that contribute to these poorer health outcomes in Black people compared to white people. Mm-hmm.
When the AIDS crisis had started, I was working as a caseworker for the city of New York. At that time, the American Red Cross used to go around and train folks to do presentation in all different churches and organizations. Is that coordination still doing that to reach more people because they have a greater trust in the organization of the American Red Cross? Is the American Red Cross having that exposure? Even at the height of the AIDS crisis, they had a lot of exposure because they used to do a lot of training. But I'm saying that now is that exposure or the utilization by the American Red Cross because of the trust factor, being able to get into more places doing that kind of work still.
Yeah, I would say specifically if you're like referring to the American, the Red Cross, usually they respond to disasters and things that are happening like at that moment. So because at that time, HIV was an outbreak that was occurring that we weren't aware of, they were more responsive to it, right? And so now we have the knowledge, the technology, the medical advancements to be able to create medication that prolongs people who are HIV positive to even prevent from getting HIV infections. I don't know what they're doing right now, so I can't really specifically talk to it, but based off what I've seen within the space that we're in, I haven't seen the American Red Cross show up, right? And then again, to the point that they just mainly respond to like the situation that's happening there, and then it's more of like an emergency situation, yeah.
And I would also add that that's probably why we're seeing the continuous rise, is that because it's not considered a crisis anymore, you're not having these national organizations prioritize HIV/AIDS, but the same concept still exists, right? The reason that we're here is because we're a trusted organization. And so the same concept. So thank you for highlighting that.
Ms. Herbert.
We have to take responsibility for our health. And even for instance, this is a large church, and this program was announced several weeks that you all were coming here and what it was all about. Look at the few people that we have. So we have to take our own responsibility for our health.
Yes.
And get information, because this is how information goes around, you know.
Yeah.
So we have to take responsibility for, this is education, you know. that
Yeah.
People should be here to listen to, take it to your neighbor, take it to your relatives. So we have to take our responsibility for our health and for our children, or, you know, family's health.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think, sometimes some people have to hear things, 100 times before they can realize, it impacts me as well. So again, it's really up to a person how they receive it and if they find it necessary for them and at the time. But, just receiving any type of health information, even though it may not apply to you now, it could apply to you in the future, or it could even apply to somebody that you may know. So it's always important to be able to get information. Okay. So this next slide is focused on age group. So people between the ages of 20 and 29, and then 30 to 39, those two specific age groups has the highest rates of HIV diagnosis, and that's just been consistent across the board, followed by people 40 and 49, 50 and 59, 60 and over, then 13 to 19, and then 0 to 12. So you can see that the HIV diagnosis did dip, as I mentioned, during the COVID pandemic, but then also you can see since then, the numbers are increasing as the years go by. We'll talk about that, but people typically die from AIDS if they're not taking their medication. So if a person is not adhering to their medication, they're more likely to die. I think this is the last graphic. Okay. And so this is based off transmission category. So we did have someone that asked about what that looks like between people who have heterosexual contact versus between homosexual contact. So men who have sex with men has always throughout the years since HIV has become prevalent or, introduced into society, that men who have sex with men do have higher rates of HIV, right? And then followed by heterosexual contact. So anyone that's having sex with men who have sex with men have higher chances of contracting HIV, then followed by heterosexual contact, and then followed by injection drug use, people who inject drugs but then also have homosexual contact, and then through perinatal, which is a mother who's HIV positive and passes this on to her child. So even the conversation, I wanted to kind of bring this up, although there's so many different ways to contract HIV, sex is still the main way and the way that most people are contracting HIV. And so very few, the percentage of people who contract HIV through drug use, who have a history of drug use, is very low. And through blood transfusion, that is a very rare occurrence because people test blood donations and samples before doing transfusions, so that's not really an issue today. But then again, there is many different ways to contract HIV, but then there's also ways that we think HIV is contracted, but it's not. And so I wanted to ask you guys these questions. What are some ways HIV can be spread to others? But I kind of just gave away the answers. So I'm gonna ask you, what are some ways HIV cannot be spread to others? Kissing, shaking hands. What else? Yeah, saliva, sweat. Any others? Hugging, okay, all right. So you guys are all right. So we would just want to make it clear that HIV, because at the time during the height of the HIV epidemic, there was so many misinformation and misguided data information going around that we still kind of believe in today. That is not true, right? So HIV can only be transmitted through blood-to-blood contact, like direct contact, semen, vaginal or rectal fluids, and human milk, right? So if a mother's breastfeeding her child, or if, when it comes to perinatal, if a mother is pregnant with a child, her blood can then also infect her baby if she's not taking medication. So those are the only ways HIV can be transmitted. It cannot be transmitted through saliva, tears, hugging, through the air, closed mouth kissing, sharing the toilet seats, shaking hands, sharing dishes, eating off of each other, sweat, or even a mosquito bite. So if you've had any of those ideas of HIV transmissions, those are not true. And then it kind of plays into the stigma of HIV, right? When you think someone is HIV positive, you don't want to touch them, you don't want to be near them, you don't want to hug them, you don't want to eat from them, right? That can be a family, that can be a friend, it could be a coworker. So the idea of this is just to make it clear that HIV is mainly and only transmitted through sexual contact, drug use, injection, mother-to-child transmission, anal or vaginal sex, right? And so these other ways, it is not transmitted. Any questions about that? Okay, yes.
We talk about social media as being a big influence of it. Before there was social media, and yes, I was born before social media, television was really the biggest influencer that we had. And speaking to the point of what we're not seeing on television, there's a lot of influencing about homosexual population and treatment and availability and PrEP and all this stuff over and over and over and over again. But you're not seeing that black woman who is not in a homosexual relationship, who has an 18% rise, being talked about as a population that needs to be considered and seen we're not being influenced in a good way by showing those visuals on television, so that people are aware.
Yeah.
And so that just goes to your point about all the systemic racism. This is a classic example of that, because we're still, I think most of us know mosquito and whatever. They spend time to debunk those myths. But the other realities, we're not seeing it, which is why you still have our Caucasian brothers and sisters numbers being so low, because that is constantly in our view. But the other populations, or women and so on, you really don't see it. So we are not influenced in a positive way to be more aware, be more concerned for ourselves. And so I don't know how you guys do it all the time, but it's super. I feel like from I was in high school, that heat map that you showed is the very same one from 1990 something. It has not changed.
It has not changed.
I have heard the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And maybe the needle has been pushed. Maybe, I don't even know, but it looks like the same picture.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if I did this as my business, I would be frustrated. So it's good that there is hope and that you keep fighting, because when you look, it's like, what has changed?
And when you even mention it, like what comes to mind is like, how are we as a community as well, like taking the time to share information? How are we talking about it within our community? Because a lot of these things, when it comes to stigma as well, we're not open to getting the information, right? And then I don't want to say we can't only rely on the medical institutions to share the information, which they should be, but they're not. And we see over time that Black people always last to get the information. You know, most of the times when I come to these workshops and I'm like, does anyone know what PrEP is? And they're like, what's PrEP? Or like, I saw it on TV, but I don't really know what it's about. But then if I was to work in a white space and I asked about it, and they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And it's just based off like, how are these companies marketing to our neighborhoods, but then how are we also having conversations within our communities? A lot of times when we're having these conversations, whether it's around STD, sex, HIV, any type of sexual health, we're always pushing back, or there's a lot of misconceptions and stigma Right, being Black, being Caribbean, even, religion kind of pushes, sexual purity, and abstinence is definitely, very important. That is the only way that you can really 100% prevent against HIV or any type of sexual disease, right? But how are we being open to having these conversations? How are we having these conversations with our children, right? How are parents having these conversations with our children? Most times, people aren't even, young people aren't having or learning about this, again, through social media, through their peers, until they get to college. And so you see these higher rates amongst these younger groups, but then you have to ask, well, why is that? Like, how are we making it better and as adults to teach and have these open dialogue with yes.
So I've seen a few of the commercials for PrEP.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some of the commercials for PrEP, but it's geared more to the homosexual community.
Yes, the marketing.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're going to take community males or whatever. As soon as that commercial come on, they're going to be like, oh, we ain't have nothing to do with that because it's geared for even if some of them are closet homo, that's like taboo.
Mm-hmm.
So the commercial for it is not relatable to anybody, but mostly the homosexual community.
Yeah. And that is true, because you have to even think about the conversation too, is like, well, who are they hiring in their marketing for these companies' marketers, right? They're usually white men, white women, right? And so they're gonna only push out content that they probably relate to unsubconsciously. Maybe they're not really doing it on purpose, but that's why it's important. Again, this is another conversation about DEI, how we're diversifying and being able to have Black people and Hispanic people within these spaces, so that we're pushing the conversation in those spaces. Like, okay, we need to be also marketing towards about PrEP to Black people, because again, Black people have the highest rates of HIV. So how the people who have the highest rates of HIV aren't getting the information and don't have the knowledge? They should be getting the information first, in my personal opinion. Exactly. Talk about it.
Sector. Y'all have done a really good job of taking the fear out of AIDS also, because of meds, I guess there's medications. We have a family member that have AIDS, but no one will know if they see that person, right? He also has no idea how he got it. And I would vouch that he's a heterosexual male because of his behavior. But we don't have, a lot of times, well, now we don't have that conversation as often and as serious as we did when AIDS was new and people were dropping like flies. Now that we don't see the death anymore, and that may be partly what we're seeing with the American Red Cross, which is what Elder Brian brought up, because it doesn't have that fear factor, and it almost seems to be normalized. And so because that urgency is not there, we barely think about it. It's kind of like the common cold. There's the flu every year, and AIDS is there. But when you look at the statistics that you just shared, especially that female part, the women, who knew?
Yeah.
Right? And so, yes, Sister Herbert made the point that we should have a better handle on our own education. And I feel so dumb now, because apparently PrEP is something I should know about. But again, there's no urgency about AIDS because we have all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And so it almost is back in the closet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are still dying in large numbers.
Yeah. And I'm
well,
glad.
maybe not dying, but infected.
Diagnosed and infected,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because I do have a cousin, and I kind of talk about this before with my colleague, but I have a cousin that's been doing HIV work for longer than I have in the Caribbean, and he says that he realizes as well that it is become normalized, right? The way that medication is able to keep people alive. It's kind of like, okay, you get HIV, you just take the medication, and you're fine, you know, and then you're able to still be sexually active and not infect other people. But it's still a conversation that needs to be had, because being HIV positive comes with, although there's medication that can help prolong life, right? It comes with stigma. It comes with being able to maintain your health. You have to pay a lot more attention to your health, making sure you take a medication every day for the rest of your life. And if not, then it'll be progress to AIDS. So it's like, do you want all that extra work? And that's why it's so important that we get tested. We're using condoms, you know, we're on PrEP, we're using PEP, and all of those things. So we shouldn't be looking at it as something that's normal, because a disease shouldn't be normal. I mean, it's something that's going around, right? But we should always want to put our health first, and do everything we can to protect that. Yeah. Okay. So here we're just going to talk about, I'll breeze through this one. It's mostly about HIV testing and the different types of tests that there are out there that you can do. So if you or anyone that you know, right, or someone that had sexual contact with someone and they wasn't sure about their that person's HIV status, usually you can get tested 7 days after that contact. And the test would be able to tell you if if you were infected by HIV. And those different tests can look like the nucleic acid test and the antibody lab test. Those two tests are blood draws that is done with the clinician. So if you go to a clinic, they'll draw the blood. A nucleic acid test can detect HIV within 10 to 33 days, and the antibody lab test can detect HIV within as early as 18 days. And then a rapid antigen antibody test is a finger prick done by also a clinician, and that can be detected as early as 18 days. And then an antibody test is usually a at-home self-test. So you can either go to your local pharmacy, you can even order an HIV online for free, and they will ship it to your house if you want privacy. And that test, you can detect HIV as early as 23 days, right? So there are so many different ways you can test for HIV, and it's performed in different ways. So I don't want to say there's no excuses, but there are ways that, you know, you can do it discreetly without having the uncomfortability or eyes looking at you. And so here we're just going to talk about what the stages of HIV is, and then kind of looking into what the symptoms of HIV is. And so the first stage of HIV is the acute HIV. This is flu-like symptoms that occur days or weeks after contracting HIV. Stage 2 HIV is chronic HIV, so this is the asymptomatic stage, and this can last for several years. So similar to COVID, you can have HIV and not know it, and you won't show symptoms of it. And AIDS is the late stage, or stage 3. Usually this is when a person who usually, you know, who's HIV positive, they may not know, they're probably not taking their medication, or they do know and they're not taking their medication, and it's turned into AIDS. And at this point, the body starts breaking down, and you would start to see symptoms of that. And so this is kind of just a graph that kind of visualizes it for us, right? So the first tube here is before HIV infection. So these are all healthy white blood cells within your bloodstream, right? And then at point of sexual contact, a person could become infected. And then after infection, they would experience acute HIV infection. So this can happen between days and weeks of being infected with HIV. And what happens at this stage is usually a person would start to see some type of symptoms of HIV, but it's things that are flu-like symptoms. So this can be just, you know, a cough or sneezing or shivers, right? So in your head, you can think it's a flu, it could be the cold, it could even be COVID. You wouldn't know. And so you can see the virus is overwhelming the white blood cells. And then the white blood cells naturally attacks the virus, right? But the white blood cells can't actually kill off the virus. And so essentially, if someone is not taking their medication, the virus continues to multiply within the bloodstreams, attacking the white blood cells and killing them off. And then at the end, it would become AIDS, where there's essentially almost no white blood cells within your body, and then the virus overwhelms the body. So usually most people with HIV who do not develop AIDS is because they're taking HIV medication every day. Any questions about the progression of HIV? Okay. So as I mentioned, HIV symptoms can look like a fever, sore throat, lymph nodes are swollen, a rash, muscle aches, night sweats, mouth ulcers, chills, or fatigue, right? So most of these are kind of like just everyday common cold. So how are you able to differentiate the both? Usually the main difference between HIV compared to the cold, the common cold or the flu, is mouth ulcers and rashes. So if you're experiencing those, I'm not saying if you get it tomorrow that it is HIV, but those are symptoms of what differentiates HIV from flu-like and cold-like symptoms. And again, HIV is usually asymptomatic for a very long time. A person can be asymptomatic. All right, so here we're going to talk about antiretroviral therapy. We call it ART for short. And this is medication that is given to people who are HIV positive. Before, it used to be called a cocktail, so it used to be a lot of different medications a person was taking to fight against the virus and also prolong their life. But now, because of medical technology, most people are only taking 1 pill or 2 pills. And so it's not as much medication as it was back in like the 70s and the 80s. So a person who is living with HIV and who has access to ART and they're taking it as prescribed, they reduce the amount of HIV in their body and then also reduces the risk of transmission. So this is something that we call U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable, sorry. So someone who's HIV positive, who's taking ART medication, the virus would be so low that they wouldn't be able to transmit it to another sexual partner who is HIV negative. So there are a lot of reasons as to why someone who's HIV positive to be adhering to their medication and continue taking their medication. Also, it helps prevent HIV from advancing to AIDS. The ART medication helps protect the immune system, and then also it prolongs a person's life expectancy to near normal. Any questions about ART medication? Yes. The key is to get it early, and that's why we encourage people to use condoms and also to test.
So if you're on ART therapy and your levels are undetectable, are you still telling those partners that they should still be using a second layer of protection, condom, etc.?
Yes, yes. So even if there's 2 partners and one person is HIV positive, it is still encouraged that the person who's HIV negative to still use condoms, to even take PrEP, which we'll talk about, so that it can even lower their risk of contracting HIV. Mm-hmm.
To get ART early, you would have had to be proactive in terms of getting tested when you come in contact with anyone. And so therein lies the problem, though, because if you do not believe that this person is potentially you sick person, and I say sick in quotes because, I mean, infected, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, so if you do not have any reason to believe that the person you just had contact with is infected, you won't go get tested. And so getting ART early seems to be the trick here, the way to actually not be overwhelmed by this virus. But you would have to believe that the person you were with is infected. So unless every time you have sex, you go get tested?
Yes.
Okay.
Every time you have a new sexual partner, you have actually the best thing to do is get tested before you both get tested before having sex with each other. Well, even so, we have to think about it like, as we call it, like risk factors. So a person of multiple partners are more likely to contract HIV and STDs. So it's always encouraged that just in general, healthy sexual practice is that before having intercourse with anyone that's new, you get tested, right? And say if you are in a monogamous relationship and it's someone who's a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or whatever it is, that you at least get tested at least once a year. Yeah, like whenever you're doing your regular general checkup, whether it's with your PCP, your OBGYN, whenever they offer you that HIV STD test, say yes. Every single time.
And even if they don't ask, because oftentimes
they don't, you ask.
You request it.
Yeah, yeah. I know I do. I'm married, and every time I go to my doctor, I always get tested. Yeah, because I always say the only person you can really trust is yourself. And sometimes you can't even trust yourself. And so how can you be able to trust other people? I mean, you're only going to go based off of their word. And we would like to believe we can trust people on their word, but that's not always the case. So you just always have to protect yourself and put yourself first.
Have no symptoms for years and years and years and years. So something could have, even before you met your spouse or whatever, it could show up many, many years later.
Exactly.
And you're in a monogamous relationship, so get checked. But to your point, it is not offered. And that's the importance of having providers that look like you, that understand the statistics related to us. Because your white provider, they'll do your thyroid function and everything else, but it's not coming up in a conversation. That's what I've seen, unless you explicitly ask for it.
Yeah, and that's why you need to also have a trusted PCP or doctor, right? My last OBGYN, she was a white female, and she offered it to me. And I was like, sure, I'll do it. I didn't even have to ask, right? So that's why it's really important not only to advocate for yourself when they don't ask, but then you also have a doctor that you can trust and that you know that would look out for your best interests. Yeah. Really?
So what I can probably offer is that sometimes it happens in two folds. One, providers don't ask because they don't want to offer any tests that they deem unnecessary, right? Because the way that the healthcare system works is that they're being measured by their ability to care for someone. The second thing is that sometimes a provider will ask that, and the person will take offense. And I think if a provider asks a patient that many times, or different patients that many times, and the response is, why would you ask me that question? You know, that the person feels insulted. Sometimes because the provider is a human being who is may come from a Caribbean background, who may know, I don't want to ask this person that question because they may think that I'm making assumptions about them. Yeah. So there's a lot of different reasons why that happens, which is why at the end of the day, you have to be your biggest advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a question in the back, but also I was going to add to that as well that some doctors also make personal assumptions about people. I've had conversations where a black female who has a PhD, and she went to her who works in the HIV field, and she went to her provider, and she's like, can you prescribe me PrEP? And they were like, why would I prescribe you PrEP? And she was like, well, if I have to answer that question for you, then then obviously something is wrong here, because you're just assuming because I'm a doctor and I have a PhD, then I'm just automatically making good sexual health practices and decisions, but that doesn't make it the case. Yeah, we had a question back.
So, with the knowledge that you're sharing this evening, and unfortunately it's very few of us in here, there is a stigma attached to HIV. Mm-hmm. Once you hear that, it's only a certain people that comes with that. And it's also, like you said, the healthcare professional could be, projecting like, yo, they come from that neighborhood, so they need to get it. So you have that wall up. Mm-hmm. The first time I was offered that, I looked at the guy like, what? You crazy? Mm-hmm. Why would you ask me that? You just asked me if I'm sexually active because they asked you that question and I told you no. And then you're going to offer me that test. I'm like, really? But then with a little bit of knowledge, I realized that, oh, it's good to know. Mm-hmm. Like Sister Alcock says, you could have this forever, and it just shows up now because your body is not in tip-top shape. So for each and every one of us in here, the next time you go to the doctor, if they don't offer that as a part of your panel, please ask for it.
Yes, thank you for that.
I just want to add that sometimes it's not one of the things that we need to also consider is if you have ever had a blood transfusion. Mm-hmm. So we can also have it through that. So it is important that we ask for it, not necessarily because we assume that our partner may have been active otherwise, but if you've ever had a blood transfusion, you could also contract the virus that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so usually yes, that's exactly how Arthur Ashe died. Usually it's said that anyone, between the 90s and before that, right, if you've ever had a blood transfusion at that time, you should get an HIV test.
So the point is not to incite fear, but I think just like, how many of you guys know what your blood pressure is?
Oh, blood pressure.
I see a lot of hands. How many of you guys know what your A1C levels are? Okay, so you should, the purpose of this conversation is that it's no different, right? Because there are assumptions that can be made if you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, right? But somehow we're comfortable to a certain degree with those assumptions about, well, if I have diabetes, that means I don't eat well or I'm not physically fit, right? HIV/AIDS status, that knowing your status is the same thing, mm-hmm. right? And so what we want to do is normalize, just as much as you say, I want to know what my blood pressure is to know what my HIV/AIDS status is, mm-hmm. so that you have a baseline. And so if someone is having these questions, right, now you're like, oh, I've had a blood transfusion before, but I don't know what my HIV/AIDS status is, right? So you shouldn't feel fear, but what you should feel is, I'm going to get checked, right? So that's the purpose of this, is normalizing HIV just as much as your blood pressure, just as much as your A1C.
Thank you for that, Faven.
One of the things that crossed my mind is neutralize stigma. Mm-hmm. But also there are other diseases, cancer, arthritis, or so forth. There are other diseases that we will say, well, it came up, like cancer, but there are other ways to be more proactive. Mm-hmm. And that proactive means that you say, if I have it in my family and it runs in heart disease, cancer, and it runs in my family, you just ignore it and say, well, it does trigger. But there's a proactive way you can approach it. It says, I want to get to see if that genetics runs in the family. Now, it would require you getting some counseling in terms of being prepared for that if you're going to do that. Because I took the more proactive position, mm-hmm. in terms of my family. because I had 4 generations of cancer running in the family. So I took a more prize. I said to the doctor, I want to get a genetic testing. So I prepared my mind for that. But I'm not going to live and say, well, it runs in the family and he missed this one, got one. And that way, being more proactive, and you can make better decisions in terms of what to do for the future as well as the present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that. I know it's a little off topic, but I know. I was going to say, soft plug, we are going to be doing workshops on genetic testing. So if you guys want one of those, we could do those too. So I'm glad you brought it up. But it is still important, yes.
But the message of being proactive so that you can make informed decisions,
yes.
Right? You don't want to be in a position where you're making reactive decisions about your health.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is a great introduction to potentially doing another workshop here if you guys enjoyed this one. Yes, so we also want to highlight the importance of, we was talking about art therapy, and then we kind of talked about how people are living healthier, longer lives. So there's a lot of prominent figure, everyone talks about Magic Johnson, like how is he still alive? But also we think about he has access, money, and to great care and medical professionals. But then there are also people like Billy Porter, who's a famous actor, singer, writer, and director, and Ray Lewis, who's an Emmy Award-winning AIDS activist. And there's so many times where we've done community work, and I've had people literally walk up to me, and they're like, yeah, I'm HIV positive, and I've had it for years. And like you mentioned, like, they look living healthy, regular lives, which is important. We want people to live longer and be able to live healthy lives without the fear of stigma, being judged, and even just dying. I mean, we all die one day, but certain ways of death, we don't want to die that way, right? Prematurely, yes. And then again, we talk about Arthur Ashe and how he was infected with HIV, and how a lot of the work that he's done throughout his life was just being a social activist and a humanitarian, and being able to address all the health disparities and health inequities that, through his experience as a Black man who was HIV positive, who also had access to resources, right? Seeing how Black people were treated differently in that process, and just being an advocate for just the civil rights movement, and just trying to find ways of how we can improve the lives of Black folks. And this is why our organization is still here today, or is here because of him. All right, so I know we kept talking about PrEP. And so for the folks who says that they've heard of PrEP, what is your understanding of PrEP, and how informed do you feel our community is about it?
I think we know the answer to this.
Oh, yeah.
If you're concerned about exposure, then this is a medication that you take to decrease your risk of potentially getting HIV. What I don't hear about are folks, so this is post-exposure treatment, but what I don't hear a lot of is pre-exposure management with these therapies.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? I saw a hand. No? Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. So PrEP is what we call pre-exposure prophylaxis. It is a medication, as you mentioned, which is in a form of a pill that can be used for individuals who are HIV negative, right? So this is kind of considered for before someone is HIV positive, they can take PrEP to avoid contracting HIV. So usually this is, it can be personal, is usually encouraged, especially amongst people who have multiple sex partners, people who are living with a partner who's HIV positive, and people who use intravenous drug use, right? But a lot of times the conversation is not brought up with even just like amongst Black women and even Black men, right? A lot of the conversation around PrEP is usually for people who have homosexual contact, which is not only the case. PrEP is for everybody. Once you are HIV negative, you can be on PrEP, no matter age, gender, race, ethnicity. Anyone can take PrEP. And so if at any time you may feel that you need PrEP or just want to just be on it to protect yourselves in general, you can always go to a HIV clinic or a doctor and ask to be prescribed for PrEP. Any questions? Okay. I forgot to mention PrEP is a pill that you'd have to take every day. Yes. And then.
So I have adult daughters. Should I ask them about PrEP?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they know about it.
Yeah.
Or they should know about it. They're grown.
But you don't know. You have to ask them.
What? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll have the conversation with my daughters about PrEP and see what they know.
Yeah.
And there's one in particular that I'll recommend that she take it.
There's power in knowing who your children are.
Yes.
And giving them the tools to be proactive about their health.
Mm-hmm. There's a lady.
Okay, so PrEP, and maybe you guys in your space, you with Arthur Ashe, right?
Mm-hmm.
In your space, you could probably put a little more in terms of awareness that PrEP is not just for men who have sex with men. All the advertisements I've seen is PrEP, and it's for men who have sex with men.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's not just for them, but that's what the world sees. So maybe among your space, you could have some kind of advertisement that would include the other groups, right?
Yeah.
And Denise, this one is for you. Now that you've learned something, it's a good segue to have the conversation with the girls this way. Guess what I just learned? Instead of dropping it on them like a bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for reiterating that. Yes. Throughout the presentation, we have mentioned again, a lot of the information around PrEP is marketed specifically to certain people who participate, their sexual orientation. But again, PrEP is for everybody and can be taken by everybody. So thank you for reiterating that. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they'll allow us to actually have that conversation with the youth here. The parents. I don't know if the parents will allow this. And that may be part of the not knowing.
Yeah. Well, we can, if it's something that she want to do, is really important to let the parents know why it's important for their kids to have this information and getting their consent around us teaching or just giving them that information. And then even just, encouraging them, the other parents, to be in this space so that they can even know themselves. Yeah.
To make it easier for the information to be transmitted to the younger folks.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm shocked that 13-year-olds are indulgent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a question here, but I just want to highlight that is a great strategy, right? Those of you guys that are here understand that this topic is important, but not everybody may think that it's relevant or appropriate. But now that you have the education, now that you're informed, you become the advocates. Mm-hmm. And so how do we leverage your roles as advocates and trusted members of this congregation to empower other members who have kids who may be at risk, who should be a part of the conversation? You'll have the honor of taking a survey at the end of this, and one of the things that we'll do is get your feedback on, if we were to do this for parents, how would you like us to tailor the conversation? Because we want this to be digestible for everybody. And so we probably wouldn't jump into the youth. We'd probably want to get their parents bought in and then have them say, actually, I do want my kids to be informed.
You touched on what I was going to ask in terms of sex education. I know many of us, or some of us, I should say, leave it up to the school, and we don't know in terms of the school what level they go unless we interact with the school. So that's probably the idea of exposing the parents and educating the children in both that dual way, so that everybody come to the same page, or get to be on the same page.
Yeah, you brought that up. A lot of the conversations we've had, and the conversations that's happening in just the sexual health, public health space, is that there is a disconnect between the schools and the parents. And the schools aren't providing sexual education when they should be, because they don't want to offend parents. And then the parents are like, oh, well, I thought the school was teaching my kids sex ed. And the parents want their kids to be taught sex ed. So it's like, how do we encourage the DOE and teachers and the principals at these schools to be able to continue to advocate for sexual education now that sex ed is being dismantled and not being taught in school, or it's not encouraged as much anymore? That can be also part of the problem with high rates amongst teens and young adults. Yeah, we know. I know. Yeah.
So good luck with that. I grew up learning everything in my parents, taboo.
But people can change. People can change. Yeah.
Okay, so I grew up differently because my dad was never hesitant in talking about sex with all of us.
Right.
He may have given us too much information. That's another conversation. The church, however, is in partnership with the parents. If the parents are reluctant or don't have the words to actually engage in that conversation with their children, the church cannot be shy about doing it, though, and this is a problem we have. The parents are uncomfortable for whatever reason, and the church will not touch it. So this is not you guys' problem, it's ours. We have to be willing to treat it as any other information like you brought up, like your diabetes or high blood pressure or all the other things. And until we get there, it's going to be an atmosphere of misinformation, no information, which we have now, because I can't believe I didn't know what PrEP was.
Yeah.
I've seen the commercials, but I also thought it didn't apply to me because it was always, the homosexual men or, transgender, right? So how is the church going to get comfortable with just disseminating information that's important to a younger generation?
Yeah.
This is where I think we will have the problem in this church, because we are uncomfortable ourselves with the topic, and we all think that our children are pure and undefiled. So I'm not in the health department, but Sister Herbert is.
Yeah.
But so since you are in contact with her, let's see if we could do this again, maybe in a time that is a little bit more convenient, and have, advertising or something where we could build momentum to have more of the parents here. Because the parents are who we're going to have to fight, not the kids. The kids don't mind the information, but the parents are going to, be the barrier to the information getting to the younger folks.
Yeah. I definitely, I'm glad you brought that up. And I would say that I extremely appreciate you guys just even allowing us to be here to share this information with you all, because I've personally have experiences where even at the church that I attend, where I ask like, hey, how are you comfortable with us bringing sex ed into church? And it's kind of like, well, we'll see, you know? And so one, taking that first step as a church to like allowing this information to be in this space is really important. And two, I think it's really up to church leaders to be able to say, even if others in the church may not feel comfortable, this is still something that's important. Because a lot of us look up to our church leaders for guidance and for information, and they have a lot of influence within, not only within the church, but within the community. So how are people who are leaders of the church open to and receiving the information despite our beliefs, you know, and what we believe in? Because, you know, again, the main conversation is no sex before marriage and abstinence and saving it for their part, that husband or wife that you have. But to your point, that's not always the case, right? And people are still having sex no matter if they're in church or not, outside of marriage. So it's still an important conversation to have, and how are we protecting ourselves? So I appreciate you bringing that up, and I appreciate you all even being here to receive this information. Mm-hmm. I can tell. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we could get the health professionals to collaborate with you guys.
Yeah.
And we could get more of this, and maybe be able to get larger numbers here.
Yeah, definitely agree.
One of the things I wanted, you know, way back when I was dealing with AY and all of that, I brought people in that talk about pregnancy in the church, in AY. But I'm saying AY is not that strong as it used to be in certain areas. But what we have to explore is bringing the information from people who we trust, not necessarily don't trust you when I say, from within the church structure, to bring that forward, because they come with a sense of credibility already. And because of that accepted credibility, we should entertain exposing that not only to the youth but to the congregation, so that everybody is on the same page, and that one party is not in darkness while the others are trying to make headroad. So that's something that we should look into exploring, bring more people with credibility within the Adventist church. I'm not saying I'm excluding y'all, but that adds another layer in terms of acceptance and also venue to share or impart critical information, what you're talking about, not only AIDS, HIV.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for both for sharing that. And that is something that you guys can just like even have as a conversation outside of the institute. You know, as you mentioned, there's nurse practitioners, it's people who are very knowledgeable. So how can they lead sessions and share information, health-related information, and continue the conversation outside of just us being here?
So I was just about to say that, because I'm hearing suggestions from leaders, but we plan for church. We plan for events, and we have departments, and this is a conversation I'm hearing from church leaders. So I think that's a conversation that needs to take place at a different level outside of the institute and outside of this presentation here right now, because the end of the year is coming, and so next year we're planning for next year. Those are the kinds of things that I think should take place at that level.
Yes, I love the follow-up, the next steps, and you know, for finding out ways how the conversation could continue.
And I just want to add that I already sense, based on this conversation and the work that you do, that what you're trying to create is a culture of health, right? And so in creating a culture of health, you can organize, and it may be more receptive if you say, we're going to do a series of health topics. Once a month, we're going to cover diabetes. Once a month, we're going to carry mental health. We're going to talk about, so that it doesn't feel like there's a hyper focus, because just as much as HIV/AIDS is an issue in this community, that dark area that we saw on the map also is reflected when you're talking about diabetes,
Everything.
every other disease. So it's not this community has lifestyle changes that need to be made in terms of sexual health, but it's also what really is going on in our communities that is making us more vulnerable to all diseases.
Yeah. And I would love to say that scientifically, research has shown that 7 Days Adventists have the healthiest out of different Christian denominations, and you guys probably know this. Yeah, kind of like Blue Zone, but just in general, 7 Days Adventists are usually the healthiest out of all Christian denominations, and that's because of being able to be open about conversations and just the healthy lifestyles that you all practice, and so that is also a reflection of just, yeah. All right, it is 7 o'clock, so I just want to be mindful of everyone's time, but I love how what conversations we're having, and I love that you guys are definitely participating, but if you do have any important questions, please still ask. So not only does PrEP come in a pill form, as of recently, there is an injectable PrEP, which people, obviously taking a pill every day, similar to birth control, people might forget, you have to maybe set an alarm, right? So injectable PrEP is also a very effective way of protecting against HIV. Before it was something you can take every 3 months, but now you can take it every 6 months. So you just go to your medical provider, they give you an injection every 6 months, and that injections help against fighting against HIV and not contracting it. Usually it's prescribed for people who are experiencing side effects from the oral medication. All medication has side effects no matter what it's for. So this is also an alternative, and also for people who have serious kidney disease. And oral PrEP does create side effects for the kidney. So people who have kidney disease can't take oral PrEP, so there's an option of injectable PrEP. And if you're afraid of needles, you could just do the pill. And so there is also PEP, which is post-exposure prophylaxis. So you can look at PrEP as the oral pill as like a birth control. You will consider PEP as the morning after pill or like plan B, right? So post-exposure prophylaxis medication is, say, you come into sexual contact with someone who you find out is HIV positive, or you don't know their status, but you weren't on PrEP. You can take PEP within 72 hours of sexual contact to prevent contracting HIV. So 3 days. So say if you had sex today and you're not sure about the person's status, or you do know that they were HIV positive, you can take PrEP within 72 hours, and it would decrease your chances of contracting HIV to a very small number. The earlier you take it, the more effective it is. Any questions about that? Okay. And so although we're talking about PrEP and PEP, we still encourage condoms. PrEP and PEP only protects against HIV, but there's still a list of other STDs that a person can get through sexual contact. And so it is still encouraged to use condoms even when you're on PrEP. And I just say, just use condoms in general, every single time. And it is still one of the most effective ways to prevent any type of HIV transmission, chlamydia, gonorrhea, herpes, HPV, syphilis, and all the other STIs that is there. And so I'm gonna just skip over the question, but the question was, what are other diseases you're aware of that can be transmitted in ways similar to HIV? Hepatitis C. So hepatitis C, right? So this is what we call a co-infection. When usually people who are HIV positive, they are also most of the times, hepatitis C positive. And so usually when a person is doing an HIV test or tested positive for HIV, the doctor always gives them a hepatitis C test. And so hepatitis C is a virus that infects the liver, and this happens through passing of blood from one person to another. And so the hepatitis C virus can then cause liver damage, which would look like fibrosis, then cirrhosis, and then can also lead to liver cancer. The good news is that unlike HIV, hepatitis C is curable, so you can be treated for it. Usually it takes about 6 months of treatment to be able to be cured of hepatitis C. And actually, unfortunately, 50% of people who are hep C positive don't do their treatments. And that is another conversation as to why they don't do it. But if you are hep C positive or find out that you have hepatitis C, do the treatment. It is curable, and it's not a death sentence unless you're not taking care of it. And so symptoms of hepatitis C can look like fever, fatigue, dark urine, nausea, and vomiting, clay-colored bowel movements, jaundice, which is the yellowing of the eye, joint pain, abdominal pain, and losing your appetite. So the symptoms are is a lot different from HIV and a lot more noticeable compared to symptoms that are more like flu-like when it comes to HIV. So hepatitis C is transmitted again through blood transfusion. So if you've ever had a blood transfusion before 1996, you should be getting tested for hep C and HIV. It can also be transmitted through piercings or tattoos, any type of unsterilized equipment. And so it is encouraged that people who are getting tattoos and piercings get it from a licensed tattoo or piercing shop. Or pedicures, yes, that too, because hepatitis C can be transmitted that way. Also, if you've had a needle stick injury, hepatitis C can be transmitted that way, even through dental and medical treatment. So making sure dentists and doctors and nurses and everyone's sterilizing their equipment, or discarding them properly, because even nurses and doctors, things happen. And then also it can be transmitted through unprotected sex. So any type of blood-to-blood contact, someone can get a hepatitis C, or sharing needles or using any type of injectable drugs. So that is how hepatitis C and HIV is very similar in transmission, and why most times people can be transmitted with both at the same time, because of the ways of transmission. As I mentioned, hepatitis C can be cured actually in 3 months, so it's less than 6 months, by taking daily oral medicine. And then after you've been treated and cured, there's no more virus in your blood, and you can no longer pass hepatitis C to others. Also, pregnant women are tested every time women are always tested every time they're pregnant for hepatitis C. And unfortunately, I think today, RFK Jr. just announced that they would be removing Hep B vaccines. I know it's a little bit off topic, but pregnant women should be getting vaccinated with Hep B, and children should be getting Hep B vaccinations. So weird times we're living in right now. People should be tested for Hep C at least once in their lifetime. So if you've never had a hepatitis C test, you can always request for it from your doctor. Any questions about hepatitis C? No? Yes, so anything that's not sterilized, so it can be like grooming tools, like say if a barber is like using cutters, anything that can whenever there's blood involved, you can contract hepatitis C. So it's important that you're going to places who are using best practices and how they're sterilizing their equipment, cleaning up after each client, and then even like tattoo and piercing shops and things like that. Any other questions? All right, so we're kind of wrapping up. Should we do the true and false? Right, true, false? Okay, so as we're wrapping up, I'm gonna do a quick true and false to see how much knowledge you've all attained. But also we do have a post survey, is a lot shorter than the first one, so it'll take you like 5 minutes just to see how much knowledge you've retained as well. And then also we have food next door. So there's some pinwheel wraps, some fruits and vegetables. So whenever you're finished, you can head across as well. And so I'm gonna read out these statements and you all are gonna just shout true or false. So the first statement is, HIV can be spread by sharing a glass, fork, or plate with someone with HIV. False. Someone with an undetectable viral load cannot transmit HIV. Undetectable viral load cannot transmit HIV. It's true. So you equal you. So if someone who's HIV positive, who's on their medication, will become undetectable and they won't be able to transmit HIV to someone else. If I take PrEP, I can stop using condoms when I have sex. False, right? Even if you're on PrEP, you should still be using condoms. PrEP can help prevent HIV infection. True. Everyone should be like, true. Yeah. So PrEP can help prevent HIV infection. PEP is effective only when taken within 72 hours. True or false? If it's taken within 3 days. You said true? True? It is true. You can only, PrEP is only effective, PEP is only effective when it's taken within 72 hours. A pregnant woman with HIV/AIDS can take drugs to reduce the risk of passing the disease to her baby. True or false? True. Having HIV can increase your chances of getting hepatitis C. True. And last one, hepatitis C progresses faster and causes more liver-related health problems among people living with HIV than among those who do not have HIV. Hepatitis C progresses faster and causes more liver-related health problems among people with HIV than those who do not have HIV. That's true. Exactly. All right, so I see everyone has their post surveys. So when you're finished, you can just give them to us and then we can head next door and grab something to eat. And if you want to use the QR code for the post survey, it's also here as well.
Raise your voice and sing. Hallelujah. Sing. Hallelujah. and raise your voice and sing to the Lord. Just sing. Will you sing to him tonight? Raise your voice and sing.
Hello. Did you all learn anything new today? Yeah, okay, only prep? Okay, let's give our presenters a round of applause, please. They did a wonderful, wonderful job, and I'm so happy that they were so eager to come out. They didn't print, they came and called me and said, oh yes, we will be there. So I'm happy that you all consented to come. I really enjoyed the presentation on Thursday. We were there last year, and we were there this year, and I'm always, like to come by the Outer Ashram presentation seminars because they're always good and very interesting. Okay, so we just say thank you again to our presenters, and I'm just, what you all learned, take it home to your neighbors and to your members of the family. Let them know. And next time when we have another presentation, I will let us see this place full. Okay, today was just a teaser. So next time, I hope that more people will come out to get this information. It's very, very important information to have. Okay, so we will ask Sister Glenda come and give us our closing prayer. And head next door. We have some snacks next door. Don't leave it there. You don't want to take it home with you. If you don't want to eat it now, if you're full, take it home with you. And, okay. All right, Sister Glenda, come and give us our closing prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we are so grateful for the opportunity that you have given unto us to gather here this afternoon, and for the discussion that we had, the information that was provided to us. Father, it's your intention for us to be healthy. To be healthy, and health, is comprehensive. So it's not only the food that we eat, but every aspect of our life that you're involved in and you're aware, and that you want us to be partakers of whatever it is that is there for our health and for our good and for the good and health of our fellow men as well. So be with us all. Help us, Father, to be open-minded, and that whatever we learn here today, we will be able to help somebody else, and we will also practice. Be with these young women and all those who as well spend the time to educate themselves so that they can come and present this kind of information to us. We're not exempt from these things. We are in the world. Even though we are not of the world, we are still in the world, and we also can be affected by these issues. So thank you again, and be with us as we leave from this place, Lord. May our minds be stayed on you, and may we continue to serve you and serve you in spirit and in truth. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Never let me go. I lay it all down again. I lay it all down again. Just to hear you say that I'm your friend. To hear you say that I'm your friend. You are mine. You are mine. No one else will do, no. No one else will do. No one else can take your place, Jesus. No one else can take your place. To feel the